Somewhere like that.
She still got hers and I still got mine.
Yeah,
But that's a different situation.
yeah. Well, there's, she has hers and she has mine.
No, that seems fair.
That's what the code will say.
See you guys.
How are you?
Good. How y'all doing?
Good. How are you? So far, okay.
Good. I wanted to work some more. I'm gonna work on this, I guess, for a while.
Hey, Jeff.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Some volunteer hours.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Y'all ready? All right. Good evening and welcome to the special joint meeting for the Board of Commissioners for the City of Cushing, the Cushing Municipal Authority Board of Trustees, the Cushing Hospital Authority Board of Trustees, and the Cushing Industrial Authority Board of Trustees, and the Cushing Educational Facilities Authority Board of Trustees. Mrs. Worthy, will you please call roll?
Mr. Brandon?
Here.
Mr. Lamb?
Here.
Mr. Beasley?
Present.
Mr. Lofton?
Here.
Chairman Robinson?
Present. The chair recognizes a quorum, so we will move to item 2, scheduled business. Item 2A, presentation and discussion of opportunities for active use of city-owned property. And for an introduction to this item, we'll call on City Manager Ryan Ochsner.
Greetings, good evening, and thank you for being here, and to our guests as well who are able to join us here and online. Today's about beginning a discussion related to city-owned properties and seeing if they are going for their highest and best use. And so I want to spend a few minutes presenting that and welcome dialogue and conversation as we go along, and certainly there at the end of this we'll have time for dialogue and further conversation as you like. So. We're here for you this evening, of course. What you see on this first slide is an illustration of an inventory of city-owned properties that may have opportunity for higher use. So this isn't all of our properties, and we're not going to touch on all these today by any stretch of the imagination. But just a big overview of these are properties that at a very high level could have additional higher use. I'll give this some context here. You know, as you recall, in May, Commission adopted goals. This is the section of the goals that related to organizational finance and community economy. Today, we're beginning a discussion to explore opportunities to make the most active use of city-owned properties, as is noted there at your top goal. As you see, that was a 4-star goal. Any goal that made it on this list is important, but the number of stars just indicates where we're going to spend our time and efforts initially. So as a first step, we want to think about our inventory of properties that may have potential for greater use. The goal of today's discussion is to get an idea of the types of opportunities that may exist. In today's presentation, we'll look at examples of real estate that the city owns, explore ideas of possible uses and potential next steps. First, let's begin to think about the process after this first phase that we start here today. At some point in the future, we'll need to do an extensive amount of research when we dial into individual properties that we may be interested in working with. We'll need to talk through exactly what your detailed goals are, so we may best target programs and policy to support those. Then we will begin a process of putting individual properties to work. There are a variety of tools to choose from that could help us do that. We will ensure that any process we choose to use is public and transparent. We do want to avoid auctioning off valuable assets. The reason being that we want to ensure that the properties go to an active use and that they're consistent with the comprehensive plan, Cushing Forward. As you know, we recently finished up the comprehensive plan and received great community input into that process, so we want to make sure that our programs and policies reflect that. We want to avoid rushing. It's important to allow potential partners time to develop and respond. This is an illustration of some of the resources used for this presentation and for this phase of the process. Ownership and property data was taken from Payne County Assessor's website. Now, that database depends on the data that's reported to it and to them. It's a great starting point, but confirming the accuracy of the data will need further work. Our current zoning map, as you see in the top right-hand corner illustrated there, and as I mentioned, the city's comprehensive plan down in the lower center of the screen, specifically showing the future land use map there. The future land use map, who that referred to several times throughout this presentation, that indicates the community's preference in how land and property in Cushing should be used and how our programs and policies should support that use. So, drilling down, we'll start here in the northwest segment of town. You see the yellow circles indicate properties that the city owns according to, as I mentioned, county records. Now, the city owns other properties, but these reflect those that don't have an obvious active use. Just because they show up here doesn't mean they're realistically usable either. They may be too small to support development, or they could contain easements, floodplains, or physical constraints that make it not economically or viable feasibly to develop them or put them to a different use. So let's look at this example as on North Noble Avenue. Here towards the right of the screen, you see Highway 18, and there near the northwest corner of that magenta colored box, that is Noble Avenue and Greenlee Street. This is what it looks like from the street. Here you see a street view of that. It's a little bit under 1 acre in size and owned by the city of Cushing. You'll see as we go through this presentation, some of these properties are owned by the city of Cushing, some are owned by the various trusts and authorities that the city is the beneficiary of, such as the Cushing Hospital Authority or the Cushing Municipal Authority. So, and each one of those brings different dynamics to how that could possibly be dealt with and addressed. Next, for these, we want to look at the current zoning. For this example, you see this is zone light industrial. The future land use map from Cushing forward projects this area to be industrial, to continue as industrial. And in the this excerpt is included from Cushing forward, describes industrial uses as areas for manufacturing, assembly, processing, or storage. They should be designed for heavy vehicular traffic and should be screened where possible from public right-of-way in residential areas. And then we start to think about, once we start to understand our resources and some of the dynamics of them, we want to begin to look at what could our potential strategy be to make better and higher use of that property. As I mentioned previously, if Commission desires to further use any of these examples, we would select a public process, and we would explore working with Cushing Economic Development Foundation as one of those potential options. To do so, it would be important for the Commission to identify your priorities, such as, say, job creation, for example. And I appreciate that some of our partners from the foundation are here in attendance this evening, so thank you for being here. Next, we'll go to another part of town for further examples. This is, all the yellow dots here are located around, around Cushing Hillcrest Hospital. So you see there's quite a consolidation of property here. On the right side, kind of center, well, I guess the center of this illustration to orient everybody, you see Highland and Hillcrest there, and we see Cherry Street on the north kind of perimeter of this, and then 3rd Street where all those yellow dots and circles are oriented. A prominent feature here on this little bit over 2 acres of property is that the city owns the entire half block. It was previously occupied by residential uses. This aerial image is a bit outdated here. As you can see in this next slide, all of those residential structures are no longer there, and this is generally how the property looks today. So then we think about this section along 3rd Street, and what the current zoning shows, and it shows to be two-family residential. That's what it's zoned as today. Cushing Forward, when we consult it, it shows the area to be mixed employment. So again, we'll look at that document to understand, well, what does mixed employment mean? And generally, it means a walkable development that may include offices, medical uses, care centers, and residential uses, for example. And that's straight from Cushing Forward. And as we think about what could our strategy be on that, this area, quite frankly, has tremendous potential. And with the goal laid out in Cushing Forward and the consolidation of public property owned here, this property could create a program to seek a preferred pattern development that has significant impact. This graphic illustrates the potential of this location to provide exactly what Cushing Forward identified as a preferred use. Now, while we're in this area around Hillcrest Hospital, I want to specifically look at a different property type we have, and that's properties with structures on them that may have opportunity for a higher use. Here we'll talk about 117 South Highland, as you see labeled there in the kind of center of the screen, and 102 East 2nd. So we'll take some looks at a couple of buildings here. 107 South Highland is owned under the Cushing Hospital Authority. The entire lot is about 4,000 square foot, and the building just under 1,300 square foot. It's currently zoned as office district, and future land use is mixed employment, that type of use I described on a few slides back. So that's one example of a property that could obviously use a fresh strategy, and we look forward to hearing from you all on your thoughts on it. And likewise, across the street there at 102 East 2nd, you can see, we start to see these areas of the building that have fallen into disrepair. And we are at a point in time where we can carefully consider, should we invest in this? Should we develop it for a certain use or a specific use? Or should we seek a partner with similar goals, or some combination of all of those things? And now another building I want to point out is over here by Memorial Park, of course, at 218 South Little Avenue, owned by the city of Cushing. We need to ensure this property does not fall into any further disrepair. It's a challenge to think about how can we find an opportunity that's economically feasible for the city or private partner to invest in this property. The way we're going to find out is through conversations such as what we're having today. I think and hope that there will be a consensus that this is a valuable piece of architecture that is worth figuring out a strategy to help preserve it. As we move to the eastern portion of town, here in the center of the screen, you see Main Street. We find a property on Main Street I've chosen to feature because it's an example of a commercial zone property. As you know, this is on Main Street near Harmony Road there on the right-hand side of this image. There you see it under construction. We should pay close attention to properties that may have commercial uses. As we know, the city, of course, is funded on sales tax, and so anytime we can support a commercial use, that would be a very wise strategy to do so. Now, this is a small parcel, just under an acre in size. This is what it looks like from the street, and you see it has a fair amount of area committed to public utilities. So we have a power line running on what would be the west side of the property, and there's a water well located on that property as well. And then when we have a current look at the zoning, it's currently zoned as one family residential. But the Cushing Forward, the plan shows it as community commercial. And then when we consult the Cushing Forward about what community commercial means exactly, we find that community commercial is a land use type that's intended to accommodate a wide range of businesses and services. concentrated on a commercial corridor. A strategic land use opportunity may be that through the areas, though many of these areas are contained public utility infrastructure, it may be impactful enough to justify some flexibility due to the prime commercial location of this parcel. And although I think there's many similar parcels that could be, the same could be said for specifically in the downtown area. We have many zoned that would accommodate a similar type of activity and use. And lastly, we'll look at this large parcel near Walmart. Here you see Main Street in the yellow down towards the lower portion of the screen of the image, and Norfolk Road there on the eastern extent of this property. This is a little over 200 acres in size, currently zoned rural agricultural, and Cushing Forward did not project a future land use for this property. And so I think that is a possible strategic next step, is to work on what could be identified as a preferred land use. Part of which should include an evaluation of the infrastructure that will be needed to service different development types. Doing so will help us understand what return on investment we could expect if we desired and commission desired to extend utilities to this at some point in the future. What amount of activity can and should those be designed to support? So in closing, I want to remind everyone that our public needs will always remain. They will always be changing, and we must carefully examine each opportunity and think about it in terms of a vision and in terms of the future Cushing that you desire to see. So with that, I'm happy to go back to anything, address any questions, or just facilitate any conversation about these or any other properties that may be on your mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oxner. I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions and thoughts among the board. I know this is an important topic that everyone's passionate about, so I think first, to try to stay organized and coherent as we move through this conversation, we'll just open it up to questions first. Does anyone have any questions about the city manager's presentation this evening?
Of course, I have questions. And this is fantastic. I've been talking about this for a couple of years, of getting something like this done and getting rid of property that the city really doesn't need. I'm of the feeling that we don't need all this stuff. We need to get it back on the tax rolls, but we do need to make sure that it's functional. When we do, we need to get rid of it, but we need to make sure that there are requirements for people to get this property. I guess one of my first questions is I think this is a great start. First question is always the Walmart property. I'm always pushing on it and talking about the annexation of it, because the property north of Walmart is not in the city limits. I talked to the mayor that was here when Walmart was built. I talked to him this morning and asked him why it was never annexed, and he said he couldn't remember, didn't have a clue. I guess my question is that, do we need to go ahead and do the annexing and get that step out of the way? Or what would be a good procedure for that?
And kind of to elaborate on that, you put on your strategic land use opportunities related to that property, your recommendations were create a land use plan, understand utility needs, and kind of, can you elaborate on all that, and specifically as it relates to his question and kind of that process and recommended timeline of steps?
I'll be glad to. As far as annexation, in my mind, and others probably have additional thoughts and information that can help in this conversation. In my mind, I think that the hurdle is to make sure that it's annexed by the time that some building and development occurs out there. so that it is squarely held to our building codes and regulations. So I think it may be a bit of time till that occurs, but of course annexation takes a bit of time as well. I also, as I think about that, I think we need, as I mentioned on one of the slides here, to hear from neighbors who may or may not be interested in having property annexed as well, so that things could occur at one time. For all we know, there may be other folks in the vicinity who would like their property to be annexed, possibly. So we kind of need a chance to hear that. I don't know that there is or not.
Yeah, the only concern I have about that is when we annex them, then we have to take care of the roads. And currently, we don't have the cash. That's my concern. I agree with you 100%. We need to get those people involved for several reasons. To get them involved in the city, number one. But that's my concern with annexing the Walmart property. You know, I don't know that that's a problem because, in itself, because the city owns it. But yeah, I think that's something we need to really look at and think about, but I think the roads are a consideration.
It's a good point. Yes, sir, absolutely. And yes, Chairman, I did talk about starting the process if there's interest in working with professionals to identify what should the land use be there, because I think there is a high likelihood that there will be multiple land uses on that parcel. There may be some areas that are prime for commercial uses. There may be some that are well suited for residential uses, whether that's single family or some combination of multifamily. Also, as we look into the density that's desired there, I mentioned understanding our infrastructure cost will be an important aspect of making sure we get the right density to support the right amount of capital investment that will need to be made there, regardless. So, for example, if large lot, single-family residential is developed there, that may mean one type of sewer system development as opposed to if a more dense development occurs, which would require a greater investment in sewer, for example. And of course, we have many utilities to look through that same kind of thought process in great detail on. And it's to your other point about that, as far as timeline, we could be ready as early as next month to start a process to look at that process with commission and with the community to look at what is the desirable land use plan out there. It would be kind of similar to what was done with Cushing Ford, to look at the physical features of the site, our utility systems, and to visit with you about here's some options and what those costs and benefits are of each.
Thank you.
Does staff know if that property is currently electrified by any of the OG&E or Indian Electric or anybody like that? It's a consideration during annexation, of course.
I believe there's transmission, but no distribution.
Okay.
The distribution that was there has been disconnected for some time.
I saw the oil field road is listed on there, so that was what spurred that.
We have electric to Walmart, so we've got electric essentially right there to the property anyway, true? Correct. This has been investigated before. It seems like we have water and electric. We do, and there's also sewer there. Now, albeit that sewer is only to service the current occupancy, not any additional occupancy, but. Is there a lift station down on that corner? Just east of Walmart, yes, right off the highway. Well, east of the dentist office, it's there. So essentially, the utilities are close by already. To serve the current occupancy, not any growth. Right. They wouldn't require another substation, would it? Depends on the developer. I'm saying that in jest. somewhat.
Hopefully not, but it would depend on the development.
We don't own all the way to Grandstaff. Is that school land?
Yes, it's bordered on the north 80 on his aerial there, directly north of our, yes, north of his almost box, that's an 80 that's on the school land, and then the west of that is all school land as well. So the whole parcel is surrounded by school land.
And some of the things that seems like it come up a few years ago when we was in this discussion was the pipelines that run through there could create some issues.
I've got a picture of that somewhere, I'll get to it.
Just like the majority of properties in town, I mean, the underground infrastructure is always gonna be a challenge here, where you can develop and what some of those easements are.
You don't want to dig in your backyard without calling Okie first.
But I understand that the property, the school land west of this parcel has more crisscross pipelines than this particular parcel, doesn't it?
I would agree with that, yes.
And the other thing is, I mean, the advantage for getting that property that borders Grandstaff is if you have a residential development or any other kind of development, you'd have another exit from that subdivision. If you had a fire or anything else, you'd have access to Grandstaff, which would probably be a positive thing.
Okay, we talked about the process of determining, you know, how to use this property. And, you know, I'm not a big fan of studies right now and consultants, because basically, you know, they do the studies and that gives you someone to blame the mistake on. I think we've got people in this community, very intelligent people, a lot of them in this room, that are capable of at least taking it to the point that maybe we do need to get some professionals in and making determinations on not only this Walmart property, but the armory, the lots there by the hospital. I would like to see some kind of a committee formed, and I don't know if that's something the EDF is manned up to do. I mean, do you have the manpower to do that?
We could do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's my thought. I mean, again, not a big fan of studies.
I might start with Ron, since we're the senior in age on the commission. I know what Ron's opinion is, that the baseline is that government shouldn't own any property until it really justifies it. And, you know, we had our visioning study, and you remember we talked about the core purposes of government. There's community safety. You come and have a community so you can have safety. That's fire protection and police protection. So right there you want, I guess you could rent a fire station, but it's probably better to own the fire station, own the city hall, own those essential pieces of property that you need to do the core values of the core purposes of a community. And you ought to evaluate every property. Does it start with a core purpose? Then the next purposes of a community is economic development, financial well-being of the citizens, and those kind of things. And then you can start looking at properties. Well, does this fulfill a secondary purpose, and will us owning it or doing something with it further that purpose? And so, like, you're looking at the property on 3rd Street, if that became housing, and housing's a problem for our community, and citizens need housing, that would be furthering a secondary purpose of government. So, yeah, I think you just have to look at each property and go through the process of, is this a core purpose? Is this a secondary purpose? And does this help us meet that purpose? And how can we do it? Do we have enough money to do it? Is it economic to do it? Would it be better if private enterprise just owned it and did something that they thought was economically valuable. Some of our job is just to stay out of the way of private industry. But other times, private industry could certainly use a boost and help for, I'm thinking about infill housing. We end up with these houses that, for tax purposes or whatever, we end up getting, and then it gets demolished and we end up with a lot. Well, maybe you further the purposes of your community if you take the lot and don't just sell it and take the money and stick it in the cash drawer. Maybe you should sell it and incentivize development on it. Maybe you should sweeten the pot to make sure you get a nice infill house on it that a developer might not do himself, but the city might be better off if it was a higher quality home that we helped sweeten the pot on some way. So, I don't know, just all these things we gotta look at. I'm big on infill housing, and I think it's a hard sell for people sometimes, because it's not cheap to build a house anywhere, but,
Well, and I agree with Commissioner Brandon, is that, yeah, because of Cushing and our situation, we're gonna have to incentivize people to come in and do this stuff. Now, let's don't get carried away. But yeah, that is something that needs to be done. And also, some people may not like this, but the private sector usually does a better job than the government sector. So I think anytime we can get the private sector involved, we're probably ahead. Not every time, but most of the time.
Yeah, and to elaborate on the housing and the infill conversation that was just going on, I know we've talked about this before, so this is more of a statement for the public, but I would like to see an infill housing program developed with city staff that we could consider for opportunities for various city-owned pieces of property. And I know there's a list much more extensive than the one we have tonight and the examples you presented tonight, but I think there's probably many opportunities on city-owned property that that could be ideal opportunities for infill construction. And if we had some kind of program that was defined and had certain criteria that was black and white to allow for those properties to be used for those opportunities, and incentivize it somehow, I think that would be beneficial to the community, especially with our housing issues. So,
I would think a good thing we need these lots that we inherit from people not paying their taxes and us having to mow them, that stuff like that, is we really need to investigate to start with to make sure we have clear title to them. Because I know of a circumstance where we ended up with a cloudy title and didn't know it.
Which
And I would
time?
think that would be a first step.
Which time, right?
You know the one I'm talking about.
I'm sure there's more than one.
And
Yeah,
on,
that's what
and
I'm
on that
afraid
note,
of.
since we are talking about, city-owned properties, can maybe, Matt, you can elaborate on this somewhat, just the process, and I know it's different with the city versus its trust authorities, but, the legal things we need, the legal considerations for, liquidating or selling or transferring those properties, and what's important to make sure we do, and where do we have flexibility?
Yeah, and I think that's gonna depend on the property. And it's gonna be a property analysis, because if the property was purchased or acquired for, let's say, a park or public works such as a sewer station or lift station or water treatment facility, if it's purchased or acquired for those purposes, then it has to be sold by a vote of the people. The city charter is something that's also gonna come into play. I haven't fully reviewed it as it relates to the selling of property, but again, that's something that could impact it. Now, if there's not anything precluding us from moving forward with the sale and those other instances don't apply, then we just need to get an appraisal and title work and everything else, make sure we're good to go, and then we can move forward with selling it. But there's definitely a bunch of avenues that we could take, but it is a process.
I know we have, you mentioned the Economic Development Foundation members here and the executive director here, and I feel like the board has a great relationship with the Economic Development Foundation, and you all do great work in our community as it relates to some of this stuff we're talking about tonight. And I don't know if anyone is prepared to come up and maybe speak a little bit briefly about, you know, what a partnership would look like or operate in. Maybe that's time, we can do that another time. We don't have to do it this evening, but I think it is important for us to explore working with the EDF more closely on this subject matter before us. And there's probably some ways we can. Oh, okay. So we have Bruce Johnson here.
I got a nod, Jess. I can come over and talk. Yeah, we'd be more than happy to go through each and every property that you guys own. Matter of fact, I think I've gone and shown every piece of property that you guys have owned over the last 8.5 years now. So I can tell you all the pros and cons on each and every one of those properties. When we show them what questions we get asked, what answers I've been giving, then also allow you guys to know where we need to improve to make sure that we have whatever we need to take advantage of those properties. But we're more than willing to work with you guys to hear what your guys' visions and goals are as a community. And we'll start at the very best step. At the very first step is just, do we want to grow? Do we not want to grow? If we want to grow, or where do we want to grow to? Do we want to do it quickly? Do we want to do it incrementally? If so, what resources do we have available for us as a community other than just the asset of the community, of the land in and of itself? What resources are going to be needed from the utility side? What resources are going to be needed from the incentive side? What's being asked of us from those private businesses from outside the community that are looking at Cushing and saying, hey, do you guys have X, Y, and Z? We'd be more than happy to provide all that information. I know that I've given over information to people outside the community on housing. I've given over information to people outside the community on what big parcels of land are available, what small parcels of land are available, but that we'll be more than happy to also give you guys the pros and the cons on annexation. Whether or not the resources that you guys have is worth us taking that into the community and taking on those liabilities that go along with that annexation, or because of the way that the rules and regulations are set up by the state of Oklahoma, whether or not it's best for you guys to control the development of that land and the use of that land through negotiations other than through land use planning. So those are all things that we'd be more than happy to talk to you guys about. Things that we discuss on a monthly basis for the last 8 years, and we'd be more happy to make you guys a part of our conversations and give you guys over all the information that we developed over the last decade.
Thank you, Bruce.
You guys got any questions?
Yeah, before you go, Bruce. So some of the low-hanging fruit we've already talked a little bit about tonight, the EDF infill housing. A program like that wouldn't be hard for us to develop.
It would be hard to develop for this reason, is that the land that you guys first looked at in the very first slide is 25 by 120-foot lots typically. Modern day housing needs at least 50-foot wide, so I only saw 2 lots that were contiguous that allow for that. I have personally looked for the silver bullet of infill housing in rural Oklahoma for 27 years now and have not developed that silver bullet. 4 years ago, we started conversations with rural development and looking at different programs and sections within the federal code that would allow us to utilize federal assistance money that hadn't been previously utilized. We made it all the way to the deputy secretary, and they said no. So we have worked with private developers. I personally work with the Oklahoma Home Builders Association. I've created excellent relationships with them. They're about to bring on a new president, so I'm going to go down and introduce myself to him also once he comes on board this fall. But no, it's not easy in any way, shape, or form.
So take it back.
Yeah.
And make it more simple. So what things can we bring to a developer? Permitting. Okay, so we could. Caleb, we could waive the permitting, right? That's easy. But what could we do above? That's not going to incentivize somebody to build a house. What could we do above and beyond that? And if we're limited by too narrow of lots, what other alternatives could we bring? Like, are we interested in the micro housing or whatever you want to call these, tiny homes? Are we interested in something like that?
The difficulty in rural Oklahoma is that you have to have one of 2 factors working with you to work with a builder. One is that they need to have an incredible margin, or they need an incredible volume. And because it's rural Oklahoma, more than likely you're not going to get incredible margin. So what you're going to have to do is work on the volume side, and that's when we have conversations with builders, including our 30 acres on Grandstaff and your guys' 200 acres out on Highway 33. We'll continue to have those conversations, but as you guys were alluding to, is that the development cost of that property is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 million minimum. Who pays for the infrastructure costs? How much are you guys willing to incentivize those costs in order to get development out there, and what's going to be your return on investment? And the key factor in that, as I always talk when I talk to developers, is that as a community, our X factor is time. Community will be here forever, so we can mark our return over time at anything that this commission decides it is. But that's not the way it works for a developer. They want to return in 3, 5, 10 years, whatever that may be. And that's where the negotiations and conversations need to start, is that we need to first develop what those costs are associated with that, then determine what's the best revenue source to get that paid for, whether that's special revenue bonds, general obligation bonds, whether or not it's cash out of hand to work with that developer, how much the developer wants to put in on cash themselves, exactly what type of housing you want to have out there. As of right now, because you guys own the property, you guys are the sole dictator of what happens on that property from here in perpetuity until you decide to sell. And that's a great situation to be in. But first and foremost, you guys tell us is our number one priority housing? Is our number one priority additional retail? Is our number one priority multifamily housing? Is our number one retail mixed-use development? You guys tell us what you guys want to do with that property, what resources we want to put towards that property, and we'd be more than happy to work in partnership with you to get those goals and visions fulfilled.
An important piece for me is to be housing friendly, and so if we could come up with the most simple program for some of these small lots that we have all over town that we own, that would be a win. And you could walk away from here and say, hey, we're a housing friendly community. Here's an example. We have free permitting. We give you back 10% of whatever you spend on the home and as a rebate. Right? Those are things that are not very expensive as a city that we could easily do and get a return in a short amount of time. If we can turn the conversation from being an abstract conversation and instead into one that's very concrete and feasible, I think we could have some real progress. I hate the idea that we own all this land that's useless, and these are small lots. What do you do with them? And so ridding ourselves of a lot of that would save us a lot of maintenance, a lot of headaches there. And even the things that we should be maintaining, there's a freaking tree growing out of the armory. I don't know if anybody's noticed that, but it grows out of the roof. It's been there for several years. But why am I the only one that sees that driving down the road? Because that's something that's like that all over town. We have things like that we're not really focused on, but we own them and are responsible for them.
Yeah, we don't disagree with you on those infill lots. Again, the most difficult part of it is finding that developer. And we agree with you that we should be able to have a conversation because it's much more difficult to find an investor than it is an inspector. So those are the two eyes that I make a comment about when I'm talking to people that are coming to the community the first time and are wanting to invest their money is where can we do that? When it comes to the infill housing, I know that we did a study on that a few years ago, and I think there was maybe 4 of all the lots you guys own that could actually be used for infill housing out of the dozens and dozens you guys actually own in residential areas. We get comments all the time about people that want to come in and utilize that one piece of property that you guys have that's on Main Street, and I always tell them there's already infrastructure there. It's just too bad because we don't want to disrupt your guys' ability to have additional infrastructure that serves the community from there on out. So I've always kind of wiped that particular piece of property out of my mind and how to show people because you guys may want to use that for your own infrastructure in future use. Then when it comes to the armory, again, I think I showed that property a year ago to a couple of investors out of Edmond that wanted to take a look at it for an entertainment venue. And of course, the number one issue there is that there's dilapidated houses on every side of it except for the streets are, but there's not enough parking for the amount of square foot that the actual armory is, because there is a basement in there also. So you will have to figure out simple issues like that when it comes to the infrastructure wise, is that that property doesn't even meet the code in and of itself for what your guys' current land use plan is and your future land use plan. So again, if we had that developer that's willing to come in, sign on the dotted line and negotiate with us, then we have to look at, is the skate park, does this stay or go? Does the tennis courts there, do they need to stay and go because we
But
need
we're on
parking
the
there? Yeah.
conversation, so.
Sure.
Do we have a commission that would support making a skating rink? You know, if somebody's brought an opportunity to say, hey, we want to make a skating rink, would we lease that property to them? Would we entertain that idea? So having conversation like this out loud in public, I think has purpose, right?
Oh, very much so.
Are we excited about an opportunity like that? If it's yes, then say it, you know, make that very clear tonight, because these are things that we want people to think about, consider, and come and invest, right?
Yes. Yeah, and that's another discussion that we would have with you guys also, is that if we were wanting to incrementally grow, we want to add X amount of jobs and capital a year to hit a certain goal that you guys have for the community, where we're adding a certain amount of meters each and every year. Instead of losing meters each and every year, we want to help us invest that the kids and the grandkids that we all have the ability to come back and contribute back into our community and know that they have at least the proper resources and have the proper foundation available to them based upon the decisions you guys make today. But yes, a big part of that is what we just went through, is to have a flume where we all got out our Crayolas, colored the different parts of the map, then stick to that flume as we go forward, then have those conversations with you guys about what exactly is a job worth for us, what is the capital worth for us, what is the number one goals through goal 10,000, whatever it may be, on what we want to utilize all the different areas of our community. And most importantly, what you guys are talking about here tonight is that, can we utilize the properties that are currently owned by the city, its trust, and all of our nonprofits as a catalyst to get growth started?
I'd be interested to know how many small grass lots that we own that don't really have a future use for us, right? Unless we get lucky and somebody builds, you know, unless a Mike Nishimuta comes along and builds another small home on one, right? It's an odd opportunity that we don't see very often. How many of those do we have? And could we just get rid of those, right? Sell them, get rid of them, because the amount of effort that we put into mowing those and maintaining those, that could go back into our existing property that matters, right? Edging the park, bringing it up to the next level, making it look really groomed and neat. You know, there's some things that we can do, but we don't have the resources to do that. And maybe we do have the resources, we're just spending those resources on things that really don't matter. So those are, I think, bite off smaller chunks, right? And I think that's one that definitely could alleviate a lot of pain for us. There's a lot of those lots, I bet.
Yeah, and I think you guys will also be amazed about how many of those lots were purchased for stormwater runoff.
Okay.
It's incredible that how many in the northwest part of the community and in the southeastern portion of our community was purchased just to have a removal of a single-family dwelling, in order to make sure that we had, in rain events, that we had enough ditches and culverts and all that kind of stuff to be able to handle that with a 100-year storm event.
It'd also be easy to say, oh no, we've spent so much money on those and we bought that and demolished the house and we've got to protect our investment. Well, in that scenario, our investment was creating a better place for us to live. We got rid of the eyesore. Now it's time for its next use, whatever that is.
Yeah, and other items that you and the school district have done here over the last couple of years have switched where the future development needs to take place when it comes to single-family housing, is that we're now, instead of having multiple school locations, we're essentially going to have one large campus on the eastern side of our community. You guys are already improving infrastructure when it comes to roads, when it comes to electric distribution over there. Well, I know that when the EDF colored in our future land use map, We wanted every section around our school campus to be residential because at that point in time, kids that are going to be anywhere from walking distance to bicycle riding distance would be able to go to and from the school very easily. And with those 2-set grants that the community has also been receiving lately, I don't see why that wouldn't continue to be able to take those into new developments that are attached to that campus.
All right, thank you, Bruce.
Sure. Any other questions?
No.
No, no questions. Yeah, thank you for that.
Can I respond to a couple things? Bruce said, but what the commission needed to do was decide what we wanted to do with that property on Walmart, commercial, industrial, residential, you know, just decide what we want to do. Well, we can't really decide what we want to do until we understand what each of those are going to cost us. You know, so we need some way to understand, and like Derek pointed out, if you have wide space, big lot housing, you're going to have one set of cost, and if you have close inside housing, you're going to have another. So I can't really tell Bruce what I want until I understand what it's going to cost, what's feasible, what we might do. So, I mean, I'm just kind of in the dark.
With all things equal, what do you want to see there?
With all
If,
things,
if all things were equal, what would you like to see? Do you think that Cushing needs residential growth there, commercial growth there? What do you think would be best? What's our greatest need?
our greatest need is income, is tax revenues is our greatest need, and residential doesn't give you that right away. It does in the long run, but it doesn't right away. You know, if Google came in and wanted to take the whole thing, that'd be something else. So, I mean, any of those things, what do I want that's like asking government, what should we do? I mean, in some ways, private enterprise has a big say in what I want. As a commissioner, I'd be open to it being industrial, being commercial, being a lot of things, but I don't think I ought to be leading that.
Another thing that I might add to that deal out there for residential housing, you gotta think about who's gonna move to Cushing to live in those houses, okay? A lot of the jobs that people have that live in the city of Cushing now are service-related jobs. A lot of them can't afford a mortgage for the house to start with. A lot of them wouldn't even qualify, the people that live in town now.
Well, yeah, you have a valid point there, but, I mean, you've got to, and there's not an easy answer to any of this, but, we've got to have something to attract people here. We need upper end housing.
We need jobs.
We-
We need
We
industry.
need jobs, and it's kind of a what comes first. You know,
Chicken or the
the
egg.
chicken or the egg. We get housing, that is gonna generate tax revenue, not a huge amount like a retail situation. I don't know that industrial generates a lot of tax revenue, more utility. But we need the housing. We've got to get people to come here. We've got to get people to stay here. We have a lot of people leaving because there's no place to live.
And there's no jobs. You're either flipping
Yeah,
hamburgers or.
but a lot of people would like to live here.
They'll drive. They'll drive.
They'll
Yeah,
some drive,
they'll
but-
drive. It's got to where it's, and you and I wouldn't do it.
No.
Stillwater's expensive
But
right now.
it's a new society, and driving 25, 30 miles, no big deal anymore.
That's why Perkins is blown up.
Yeah, they wouldn't,
Right.
they couldn't pay me to do it.
But the advantage Perkins has is they're 17 miles closer to
Well,
Stillwater.
they definitely have that advantage. They do, but we've got to create our own advantage.
Right.
You know, it's kind of, we've got to look at what if.
My thinking is we need to work on trying to get some businesses to come to town so people can afford to buy the houses, so they can afford to stay here.
I don't disagree, but I think it's a combination. I think it all ties together.
I'm not saying we shouldn't be prepared, but, and
And
go
see,
ahead.
that's the problem, is we're not prepared.
No, we've been sitting on that property for 30-some years,
Exactly.
and we need to do something with it.
Yeah, that's right, we got a lot of property.
Yeah, so there's some diverse views and perspectives about how best to use that land, and I think that's the big question. What is the highest and best use of that land? And maybe it's multi-tiered, but I think that it's important to know. And I know Commissioner Lamb mentioned he's not big on studies or consultants right now, and I completely understand that in some ways. But I think it's important that we know based on the land and the geography and the drainage and the utilities and all those things. I think it's important for us to have some kind of written professional land use plan that shows available options based on all those things, and understand the utility needs and what it's going to cost based on using it in different ways. And I think, as Commissioner Branyan mentioned earlier, I think knowing some of that information will help guide us forward and what to do there, and there's some activity there, and we're putting due diligence in, making sure that we find the highest and best use for that property, and know the financial impact of that as well. So that's my perspective on the piece of property.
Do we still have a warranty on the comprehensive plan? Because I really think that should have been in the comprehensive plan personally. I'm surprised it wasn't included.
Well, I can't speak to the scope of that. That was done before my time here. But probably it is technically outside the city limits. So I suppose that was the low-hanging reason for why it's not. But also, I just want to acknowledge the conversation that to decide what to do with any of this property, if anything, we do need that diversity of thought, and I think there's reasons, obviously, that many of these places have sat the way they have for a long time, but I appreciate you, Commission, for your leadership in trying to get a kind of a point on something so that some progress can be made where you desire to do so. And I want to point out and acknowledge that somebody who's just recently made the change to become a member of this community, you have, and we have, some things that are unique, and it's the community and the assets that exist here and have for a long time. It's the relatively small town feel of the community, in my opinion, but with easy access to whatever modern amenities an individual may want. We have fiber coming to town that is a huge things for folks in the lives we live these days and in this time. And then you have the things that exist in this community for a long time with healthcare, with the amenities, the public facilities, the pools, the parks, all of these things. So I could see how it could be easy to miss how unique and important those are to drawing people to Cushing. So, just wanted to-
Thank you.
Could I just say one last thing about infill housing, and I know it's difficult, but first, we do have a builder that continues to build small brick houses in town, and it seems like whatever you think about those, they're generally an improvement over what was there before. Mr. Grass built 2 houses up north. I think the commission slightly incentivized those, so we have those to look at. There was 20 years ago a series, I think maybe 4 or 5 houses built through EDF, and when the EDF chairman was here, I forget his name, I'm sorry, but we got grants for those, and those houses still look pretty nice, and they were built on just regular lots. The original houses were torn down, and those houses look nice. And Votech and the county have built several houses in town. And then there's been a couple of independent developers that have gone in and built nice little houses on lots. So we have those. The older houses that were built 20 years ago still look nice. They've continued to be owner occupied, and that's been an important aspect of that. We're also going to have a pretty good demonstration of the market value of small houses built on that Wilson property. So a year from now, we can say, oh man, that's going to be great. We can do that over again. But if those houses sit empty and don't get sold with the best intentions of the builders, then we're going to say, well, this is a difficult project. If it works great, we can do that a couple more times. That'd be good. So, I mean, a year from now, we're going to have a lot better understanding of what works in this town and what doesn't. There's no answer to anything, but it's something to look forward to.
You're great. And again, back to the studies. I got, at this point, I disagree with you. I think we get a group of individuals in the community, because we have very intelligent people. And I'm not saying that we don't eventually get a professional study, but these people know the community, they know the people, they know what's going on. They have a familiarity with it. I think that needs to be what happens to kind of lead us to ideas and thoughts about what should we do with the Walmart property. Well, you know, in my opinion, the highway is commercial, grant staff could be industrial, inside could be residential. But we've got to start somewhere, and with the lots too. There's also, I'm gonna check on something about some senior housing. I've got 2 different leads on that. I will check on that. But I think we need to do it internally first, because these people are vested here in this community and they know what's going on. Now, with that said, my next point is that we've done a lot of talk here, and I thought it was great and fantastic. I think we've had a fantastic conversation. But I don't want to see it to fall by the wayside of pretty well everything else we do is talk about it and nothing happens. So I guess I want to say is, what are we going to do and when are we going to do it?
Yeah, I don't disagree. I agree 100% with you about the committee idea. And when I mentioned, you know, the land use study earlier and options and knowing those costs based on, you know, what's out there, it wasn't necessarily discounting your idea about the committee. And we're able to form committees for certain reasons and topics. And maybe we consider creating a committee and we can have staff make recommendations on how to put that together that we can work towards. But maybe we develop a committee for this subject matter and they work hand in hand with city staff to keep this this conversation moving forward.
Yeah.
And that way it doesn't fall to the wayside.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%.
And they could also, as they develop ideas and have dialogue and deliberation, you know, they work hand in hand with staff, and then we can also bring in that professional aspect
And I think
whenever needed.
At some point in
Yeah.
time, that's probably gonna need to happen because of infrastructure.
Right.
Yeah, you'll need an engineer.
Yeah, I think you will need that for sure. But yeah, let's, oh, and a question I had is that we have these committees. And I've asked this question before, but I don't know that I've really gotten an answer that I was comfortable with. Do people on our committees have to be residents of the city of Cushing? Because I know some of the youth center were not.
I think it depends on the way it's defined, the way we
Do
define it.
Do we know? Yeah, I'd like to have clarification on
I
that.
don't know that there's anything specifically that precludes it, but I mean, typically that's not what happens, but I don't know that there's anything that
Okay,
precludes
but
it.
I'm not a typical.
I'm well aware.
Thank
Well,
you.
let's go, I'll pick up on that for a second, Ron, just a side note. So we're talking about putting our best foot forward and being our very best. We have a Main Street Corridor Committee that we've had since Andy Katz was here. It was created, what, in 2004, 2005, I think. This committee is comprised of solely city manager, assistant city manager, city attorney at this point. So really, I think you're the sole surviving member at this point. You don't even probably know that, right? But the problem is that we have a Main Street Corridor Committee with none of the none of the skill set or the background to facilitate it. So we don't have anybody, you know, you don't have an architect or a, you know, anybody with those, we have people like that in our community that could easily be on that committee. That's a great committee that we could look at augmenting and bringing in additional expertise to help share the load. Because let's be honest, we have things that take place on Main Street that never saw that committee, and we have other things that do see the committee, and it creates, you know, it creates inconsistencies.
Yeah.
But that is very much relevant to our conversation tonight because it
I will
structures who
reiterate,
we are.
we have a lot of intelligent people here.
Yes, we
And
do.
a lot of creative people, with a lot of good ideas. We've got to have the ideas, we've got to have, now, committees, as far as committees concerned, 5 at the least, 7 at the most. Yeah, don't have too many. But you've got to get this exchange of ideas out there. I mean, you think of stuff that I don't think of, you know. BJ thinks of stuff that I don't think of. Everybody up here, all these guys out here, you know, they'll come up and say, hey, and I say, oh, huh, yeah,
We'll all walk away with a new idea tonight because we took the time to try
exactly,
together.
yeah, yeah.
Well, as you can tell, this, we only, you know, have so much time to discuss this evening, so we're not gonna, and it's a discussion item only, so the purpose was, I think, to generate conversation, give staff, some much needed input on how the commission feels on some of these, this topic and some of these properties, and hopefully that was helpful. We won't be able to solve any of those problems tonight, but it is a priority for the commission, and we would like to keep the conversation going. And as you heard tonight, it seems like there's a consensus to put together a committee to keep this, to help move this conversation forward. And we look forward to continuing to engage with you and city staff on this topic. What other questions? Does anyone have any other questions of the city manager or any comments before we?
Just like we've looked at the different boards or the different planning commission and the other things we have, I'd be interested to know what committees we have already on, you know, on the books, and maybe we could look at that as just kind of a breath of fresh air there. Hey, these are the things we have, and let's add this particular committee, whatever it's gonna be called, in that same process, hopefully.
Do you have any?
Understood. We'll visit with you, kind of individually, to further refine that idea and, try to create something and develop it to bring back to you as a commission in your entirety, once we kind of explore those ideas a little further.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I would, we'll close out the discussion on item 2A, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd move we adjourn.
I have a motion from Commissioner Branion to adjourn.
Second that.
Second from Vice Chair Beasley. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say no. And we are adjourned at 6:37 PM.